Okay, so today we have the second chapter of the Medium's book, The Extraordinary and the Supernatural. Just a quick reminder that this chapter 2 is part of what Kardec calls the preliminary observations as part 1 of the book, or preliminary notions, which, as the word says, it's basically prerequisites to mediumship, to the study of the mediums in itself. I think that the hardest part, perhaps, in the studies of this book for us right now is to kind of pretend that we don't know anything that you're going to read here, you're going to study it. To try to be like an empty canvas, which is totally utopic, right? Because once you know, once you acquire that knowledge, you're not going to erase it. But if you can kind of pretend that all this that we are reading here is kind of new to us, will open room for us to learn something that perhaps we have missed. It's not the first time that we study this book, and particularly as I read it, I'm able to pick up so much new things that I have not picked up before. And I think since I'm a very average, kind of a dollar bill individual, if it happens to me, I kind of assume that happens with most of us, since I am such an average person. The extraordinary and the supernatural, we have, of course, Kardec going to try to, as usual, to define the words and to put into perspective what they say is extraordinary and supernatural, and say what the doctrine says about this topic. Is it really extraordinary? Is it really supernatural? Extraordinary, actually both words are conjunction of two words, right? Extraordinary, so beyond the ordinary, outside of the customary, outside of what's considered regular or normal. Is it really? And supernatural, outside of beyond natural, or above natural, or in derogation with the natural laws. Is it really? So that's what Kardec's going to discuss over here. Another word that meaning for both of word extraordinary and supernatural is miraculous. Are those things really miraculous? And of course, talking about mediumship here, right? And it is very important, and I think I'm going to repeat that many times because I really think it's important to really establish that as foundation of the doctrine, of the philosophy and the science of the doctrine, that Kardec, and of course Spiritism, does not deny, does not conflict what is called miracles. The miracles of Christ, the miracles of the saints. A saint, to be canonized, to become a saint, has to have 3 miracles, right? And those miracles are studied and evaluated by a bunch of bishops or whatever, cardinals, and they conclude that indeed that fact, that thing that happened with them, is considered a miracle. 3 of them, you become a saint, right? You canonized. Kardec does not say, or Spiritism does not conflict with that, does not deny those facts. What Kardec and Spiritism does is put them into perspective of science, is in the perspective of the natural. instead of saying, no, it's impossible, say, no, it is possible, and you can explain it. So for those who say that, and I heard that before, that they have a problem with spiritism because the spiritism denies all that Jesus have done or deny what all the saints have done. No, it doesn't. It absolutely agrees with them. It just places them in a different perspective. Puts them as phenomena that, if we do not understand the cause yet, eventually we will. It explains them or gives to us the tools and the probability of explaining them or now or later on. And I think that's very important, that we are not here to combat, to deny what has happened, but trying to explain them using a scientific methodology. Okay?
Okay.
We can start reading now.
Okay. The extraordinary and the supernatural, number 7. If the belief in spirits and their manifestations were an isolated concept, the product of a theory, then it could certainly be suspected of being illusory. But who can explain to us why it may be found to be so alive among all ancient and modern cultures, in the holy books of all known religions? Some critics claim that it is because throughout history, humans have loved the extraordinary. Then we must ask, what do you mean by extraordinary? And they would reply, whatever is supernatural. What do you mean by supernatural? Whatever is contrary to the laws of nature. Then you are so knowledgeable about those laws that you know how to set limits on the power of God? Very well. Then prove that the existence of spirits and their manifestations are contrary to the laws of nature, that it is not and cannot be one of those laws. Follow the Spiritist doctrine and see if all the links of the chain do not display all the characteristics of an admirable law, which resolves everything that philosophical principles have been unable to resolve until now. Thought is one of the attributes of the spirit, the possibility of a spirit acting upon matter, of it impressing our senses, and therefore of its transmitting its thought to us is a consequence, if we may so express ourselves, of its own physical, philosophical constitution. Hence, there is nothing supernatural or extraordinary about this fact. However, the idea that a person who is absolutely dead could be corporeally resuscitated, that his or her scattered remains could be rejoined to reestablish a body, well, that would be extraordinary, supernatural, and fantastic indeed, and would certainly be a true derogation that God could only accomplish through a miracle. There is nothing like that in the Spiritist doctrine, however.
Sorry, it's muted. Thank you, Sarada.
Okay.
So as I said, Kardec, take those who put the existence and the probability of communicability between the two planes of our existence in the realm of the extraordinary and the supernatural, and try to bring it to the natural, to the comparable with the laws of nature. And one of the big challenges that he takes to those who combat this possibility is number, right? Is in general, there is truth in numbers. If different cultures throughout the globe, cultures that does not have contact with one another, therefore could not be influenced by one another, carry this spirituality, have in their makeup that spirituality, that possibility of interaction between the so-called living and the so-called dead, there has to be some kind of truth in it, right? See, everyone in its simplicity of those cultures are so convinced, so sure that something survives the death of the physical body, and that whatever thing survives the death of the physical body has some degree of interaction with the so-called living. Likely there is some degree of truth in it, if it's not the whole thing is truth. It's not conceivable that all those cultures throughout the globe, without interact with one another, therefore not being influenced by one another, have that the core of their makeup of the culture, there's gotta be some degree of truth, if not everything that is truth in it. And I say most of the time because not always. There is always exception to the rules, but as a rule, there is truth in numbers, right? And that's one thing that Kardec says over here, you know. But who can explain to us why it may be found so and be so alive among all ancient and modern cultures and in the holy books of all known religions? It's a common denominator of all the religions, right? Spirituality, not spiritism. Spirituality is a common denominator of all religions. That once this body stop working and start to decay, it's not the end of the essence of whatever was controlling that bunch of organic mass that was once a physical body. It is a physical body, now decaying. There is something above it that continues to exist. That's spirituality. And that's the core of all religions. So the existence of spirit is a common goal, is a common denominator of all religions, right there. Now the problem comes with the possibility of manifestations and the communicability between the two planes of existence, right? And Kardec challenged them. Then prove to us the existence of spirits and their manifestations are contrary to the laws of nature, that it's not and cannot be one of those laws. For those who come and say that spiritual manifestation and the communicability of spirits with us is outside of laws of nature, those individuals are saying two things, and most important, this thing here, that we know all the laws. And for me to tell that something is outside of the natural laws, I have to know all the natural laws in order to say that this does not belong. And that is extremely arrogant, right? Extremely arrogant. So I know all the laws and this does not fit, right? And Kardec challenges us, or challenged them at this moment here. Well, do you think you know all the laws? Why couldn't the possibility of spiritual manifestation, the possibility of communicability of the two realms of existence be within and in accordance with the natural laws? Or, meaning this is not extraordinary, this is not a supernatural, but this is natural. The fact that we do not understand, the fact that we do not know it, does not make it supernatural, does not make extraordinary. And he jumps, and I think it's kind of in this reading right now, a little bit of a jump. And it says the thought is an attribute of the spirit. He's making a statement here. Thought is one of the attributes of the spirit. which makes a bit of absolute sense. If this if we continue to exist beyond the physical body, and we have the ability of thought, why you do not have the ability of thought, or that the attribute of thought without the physical body? If thought belongs to the brain, then once the physical body dies, the brain dies, the ability or the attribute of thought would also die. Well, that's not the case. The spirit continues to exist, therefore, the attribute of thought continues to exist. And it is thought, of course, that generates action, right? Sentiments generates thoughts, thoughts generates action. Before something happens, someone has to think of it. Before someone acts or something, someone has to think of that thing. So therefore, the ability to act upon matter precedes the thought of acting upon matter, right? Or it's after the thoughts upon matter, I'm sorry. By having the thought of act upon matter is not enough, right? We need to have something that makes it possible. And then Kardec does what here is the big jump, is that it says that it's the physiological constitution, when it says the possibility of a spirit act upon matter, of it impressing our senses, and therefore of it transmitting its thoughts to us, is a consequence, if we may so express ourselves, of its own physiological constitution. So here is a big jump. Kardec say, spirit have thought. Thought produces action. In order to act, I need something to act upon matter. If I have a perfect good physical brain, but I don't have arms and legs, it becomes very difficult for me to act upon matter, to me to express my thoughts, right? Besides both verbally, of course. But if I want to lift a table, if I don't have arms and legs, become really difficult to lift that table. So I need something extra. And that something extra is the physiological constitution of the spirit. Which is a big jump, right? I suggest to everyone to pretend that you don't know anything of it, but it's impossible. You know, here he's talking about the perispirit. Over here he's talking about the perispirit, which will explain all those possibilities, which will make everything that right now is considered supernatural and extraordinary possible, because there is something that it's material of a different nature of our ethereal matter, but can express the thought of the spirit. So if the spirit has intention of lifting a table, using the proper mechanism, the proper elements that you're going to see later what they are able to lift a table. They have the so-called arms and legs they can utilize to lift up that table. Okay, questions, comment? Again, this is very basic. Again, it's preliminary. So I don't really expect many questions, but please go ahead at any time and just interrupt me, okay? If not, let's continue to wait.
Okay. Number 8. Nevertheless, they will say, you claim that a spirit can lift a table and hold it up in the air without any support. Isn't that a derogation from the law of gravity? Yes, from the law as we have known it. But has nature already spoken her last word? Before the experiments involving the lifting power of certain gases, who would have thought that a heavy object carrying several persons could overcome the power of gravity? Wouldn't that at first have seemed extraordinary or diabolical to a common individual? A century ago, whoever proposed to transmit a telegram to a distance of 1,500 miles and receive response in only a few minutes would have been considered crazy. And if it had actually occurred, everyone would have believed that such a person had had the devil under his or her orders, because back then, only the devil was capable of traveling so quickly. Under certain conditions, then, why couldn't an unknown fluid possess a property that offsets the effect of gravity on a table, just as hydrogen offsets the weight of a balloon? We should note in passing that this is only a comparison, not a simulation, made solely to show by analogy that the lifting of a table is not physically impossible. It was precisely when learned individuals, upon observing such types of phenomena, wanted to proceed by means of assimilation that they were led astray. The phenomenon exists nonetheless, and all the denials in the world cannot make it otherwise, because denial does not constitute proof. For us, there is nothing supernatural about it, and that is all we have to say about it for now.
So in this short passage, basically Kardec is contesting our pride to imagine that we know everything already. They know the natural laws. They know what's considered normal, what's not considered normal. That the same way that we are progressing and evolving, so is our sciences, and everything that is not explained today, with open mind and with work and effort, naturally, it will be understood and explained in the future. And we see here that why spiritualists had to wait above, including other reasons, of course, is certain advancement of our physical sciences. When he contested here, if that time telegram was the greatest means of communication, the fastest means of communication, could allow communication between continents in a matter of hours. It was the telegram that a century before that, they would call the guy crazy or associated with the demon. The balloon had already existed, and I don't know how old is the balloon, should I checked? But we already understood that heating up gases, you increase the movement among those gases, and they can defy or not defy, but work with gravity and be able to levitate. So you could get in a balloon, could get quite a few human beings inside the basket, and this thing would be floating in the air as if defying gravity. As a science that could explain it. Now we have in airplanes. We got that. How many tons is an airplane? I don't even know. And how many people can put 300, 400 people inside the airplane full of luggages and of course the things that this thing flies up in the air very high and can fly at a very fast speed. I mean, how is it possible? Well, it's possible. I do not understand the physics of it, but for those who study it, they know exactly how it's possible. They know exactly the science behind of it. Now, the science of spiritism explains how a spirit can actually lift a table or any other object. Those who study the science of spiritism can explain it the same way that the the physicals that deals with airplane can explain how it so heavy and so big can fly so fast. As someone who does not know that physics very much, I'm not going to argue and deny the obvious, the same way that those who observe the phenomena should not be argue and define the obvious. They see it happening, and in order to, instead of criticize, they should seek to understand it. Because denial does not constitute proof. I love that statement. Those who choose not to believe, even when they are seeing the phenomena, choose to deny it, and does not mean anything. It just means that someone is not eloquent, both intellectual and moral, to accept there is something that they do not know, but it's happening right in front of them. It's much easier to deny than to put the effort to understand the phenomena. Is morally, it demonstrates our pride. Intellectually, it demonstrates our laziness. Okay.
First balloon flight, 1783.
1783. Thank you, Jean. So that's what I say, that spiritualism has to wait some of those things to happen before to make things possible for us to understand, you know.
Yeah. Again, I think at the time of Kardec, they had few examples here and there. Nowadays, we have so many different examples, right? Tell me how a cell phone works. We have no idea how it works, but it works, right?
Yeah.
It can communicate from here to the other side of the world immediately. Have a long conversation. When I left Brazil some 30 years ago, it was very expensive to talk to anyone outside your own city, not even state, city. And nowadays you talk for free anywhere in the world. How? Well, people know how, but I don't. And again, I think that's what Kardec brought at that time, that people still question these days, right? The existence of the spirit and the communication of the spirits and everything that spiritism and even some spiritualism has brought to us. Again, I think Kardec, as almost that summarizes very well here. Denial is not a proof, right? It's very easy to deny. I remember the story of that guy that used to question Divaldo about the existence of God, right?
Yeah.
Prove me that God exists. And then after 10 times, Divaldo got tired and told him, prove me that God does not exist. And the guy never asked the question again.
I think today is, of course, much easier for us because it's the development of sciences and technology for us to accept a lot of things and even understand that science is moving on. But throughout history, there are things that work. They have no idea how. The same way that now those who are in the field can explain how an airplane can fly so fast, so heavy. How does this huge ships, tons of things can float, does not go down in the water. That is all science that explain all that. But there are one time the people saw it's not airplane, but ships crossing the oceans, and they didn't understand the science behind that. Or very, very, very few people could explain the science beyond that. Aspirin, people is using aspirin, I believe it was 1918 or 1928, 1918. The aspirin came out in the market and was the only anti-inflammatory and good anti-inflammatory it was for many years. I have no idea how it worked. All kinds of hypotheses how it as a good anti-inflammatory, how does it lower temperature for someone with a fever. Until the 80s. It was only in the 80s that they got to understand how it works when it was discovered the prostaglandins. But everybody, when they had some inflammation or had a fever, they would take an aspirin. And the doctor would prescribe an aspirin. I have no idea how it works. But we know it works. You take it, and it reduces inflammation. You take it and reduces body temperature. So science is there for us. And now I'm going to deny aspirin because I don't know how it works. So you stay with your fever.
Yeah, but unfortunately today, what's happening is that people decided to deny science. Many people that decided that science is a whole, it's a conspiracy of the powerful to dominate the world, and it's it's all started with all this whole vaccination thing, and that expanded. But when we talk about science, I think it's important here to understand that going back to Kardec, denial doesn't mean anything, right? Denial is just a hard-headed refusal to believe in something. But the fact that a healthy science is a science that tries to research and prove. So we shouldn't have any problem with science trying to investigate and prove anything, including the what's so-called miracles and supernatural. The problem is when science refuses to investigate because it doesn't make sense, or it doesn't they don't agree with it. And that's unfortunately what happens with a large number of scientists today also. So again, science is very important. Kardec told us if spiritism, science proves spiritism wrong, stay with science. But we have to understand that, as Elmo said, the science of spiritism is not the physical science, it's the science of the spirit, right? When you study the properties of the perispirit, this is science, but it is not physical science because it doesn't belong to the physical world. But science will get there. They are moving slowly and painfully forward with the research of or the extra physical, in a sense. But the other day, I heard someone saying that I thought it was interesting, right? How religion oppressed science for centuries, for 2,000 years or more. How can we expect that science that became independent only 200 years ago comes back to the spiritual without any scars, right? They have many scars, the scientists, and in history of the scientific community. So it will take a while. It takes work. It takes work, and it takes goodwill. And goodwill is not present everywhere, every day. So we need to continue working on our side and allow science to continue working on their side, and try to find common ground, that it is possible and it's being done there is a lot of scientists that are spiritists in Brazil that are being working to combine both. There is a scientific community in spiritism. There is a medical community in spiritism that also tries to combine both areas. So we move forward slowly, surely, sometimes painfully slowly, but we keep moving forward.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right. Number 9.
Okay, number 9. If the fact of the phenomenon is proven, they will say, then we will accept it, and we will even accept the cause you attribute to it, that is, an unknown fluid. But who can prove that spirits are involved? That is what is extraordinary and supernatural. To meet this objection, a full demonstration of the phenomenon would be necessary, which of course would not be plausible here. Besides, it would comprise a redundancy, since the phenomenon is emphasized in every other aspect of the teaching. Nevertheless, in order to sum it up in a few words, we will state that the phenomenon is theoretically based upon this principle. Every intelligent effect must have an intelligent cause. In practice, this means that concerning the observation of so-called spirit phenomena, having given evidence of an intelligence whose cause could not have originated in matter, that this intelligence did not originate with the observers themselves, a fact that was proven from the experiments themselves, but had to be independent of them, and that since the being who produced them could not be seen, then this intelligence had to be regarded as an invisible being. Thus, proceeding from one observation to the next, we came to the conclusion that this invisible being, to whom was given the name spirit, was none other than the soul of an individual who used to be alive corporeally, and that death had freed this soul of its coarse visible envelope, leaving it with only an ethereal one that is invisible in its normal state. In this, then, the extraordinary and supernatural are reduced to a most simple explanation. The existence of these invisible beings having been proven, it was then shown that their action upon matter results from the nature of their fluidic envelope. This action is intelligent, since upon dying they lose only their body and retain the intelligence that comprises their true essence. This is the key to all the phenomena erroneously regarded as supernatural. Therefore, the existence of spirits does not result from a preconceived theory or a hypothesis dreamt up to explain the facts, but instead it is the result of observation and the natural consequence of the existence of the soul. To deny this cause is to deny the soul and its attributes. Those who think that they can find a more rational solution for such intelligent effects, and especially that they can explain away all the facts, let them do so. Then we can discuss the merits of both sides of the matter.
So in this part of it, Kardec brings some things that for this book seems to be also a big jump for us to reasoning. And here's what I think is important, the sequence of the codification, that the existence of the spirit, the nature of the spirit, it's already in the first book, the Spirit's book. And that's what allows Kardec to take this big jump in this book over here and say things that perhaps is very new for most people, and particularly someone who have not been exposed to the Spirit's book first, right? It becomes a big jump of some of those comments that Kardec makes over here. And I had anticipated the example of aspirin because it fits here better, and I plan to use here actually. The aspirin was in the market or is in the market forever. Nowadays, it's not even used for as an anti-inflammatory anymore because they have much better anti-inflammatory in the market. But it's still a good anti-inflammatory drug, but it's mostly used as an antiplatelet for those to prevent blood clots for those who are at risk. But at one point, it was the only anti-inflammatory in the market. The one was only, besides some natural medicine that could lower body temperature in case of fever. Nobody knew how to work. There was theory. Some people thought that they knew how to work. Actually, a lot of people thought that they knew how to work. But only into the 80s, with the understanding, the discovery of prostaglandins, that you get to understand how aspirin and most of the so-called NSAIDs actually work. But we knew it worked. Doctors prescribe it. If you have a fever, take an aspirin, and the fever would go down. At that time of Kardec, this book is 1861, right? There was the sciences going on. There was a lot of physical phenomena going on. Everybody was using as a source of entertainment. Very few was taking the opportunity to try to understand this a little bit deeper. But a lot of people was enjoying this as a source of entertainment. It was right there. It was happening. What is the proof of the proof? That it was happening. That you're seeing, that you're watching it. And once you rule out charlatanism, there was a lot charlatanism at that time. There was a lot of fake stuff going on at that time also, right? But among the fakes and the charlatans, there was a lot of true mediumship going on. There was a true physical phenomena going on. And when those are proved to be real phenomena, you witness, you've seen it. The same way that you see with a thermometer that the body temperature going from 102 to a normal 97, right? Fahrenheit. It's there. You may not understand how it happens, but you've seen it. So some would say, okay, I can agree that it's happening. I see it's happening. I can even accept that it's happening because of some unknown fluids. But who can prove that spirits are involved? There is what is and that's what is extraordinary and supernatural. The same way that let's suggest, I hope that never happened, that someone can say there is something in the aspirin that gets the spirits involved, and the spirits as the one who resolves the inflammations and the fevers, right? And we see that it's happening. We don't know the reason, so we attribute to the spirits. Now, the scientific community would absolutely deny it, rightly so. Spiritism as a science, you deny it. Again, it's an example, never happened, okay? If it did happen, Kardec would be the first one screaming out loud, no, it's not. We don't know how aspirin works, but it's not the spirits that's doing it. But some crazy one may attribute it to it. Since we don't know the cause, invent one. And what the scientific community, mostly the scientific community, and even religious, remember that spirituals had a big fight in their hands against two sides, right? The science and the religion at that time. The two that the fight among themselves, they would join forces to fight against spiritism, right? Enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? The big mistake that he was very commonly we use. And they say, okay, so the fluids are responsible for something that we are witnessing, but you don't know how it happens. But how can you say this comes from the spirit? And the fact that we don't know who's come from the spirit makes it supernatural, that it makes extraordinary. And then Kardec takes this big jump, for someone who have not read the Spirit's book, to be a big jump, and tells us how it happens. Well, those spirits, they already established, are able to think. And if they are able to think, they are able to generate actions. In order to generate actions, they require something to act upon it. I mean, again, if I have a brain that produces thought, but no hands and no legs, it becomes very hard to express my thought. So the spirits require something called the perispirit. And here is the part that becomes, when João was talking about science of thinking, a few things have been revealed that we cannot prove, that we cannot demonstrate scientifically speaking as a physical science yet. The perispirit. Someone on the scientific or even religious come and say, in order for me to believe in all of this, you have to prove to me that the perispirit exists. You have to show me the perispirit. You have to somewhat make it palpable to my senses, so to say, right? And that becomes the hard part. Being a science of observation, not a science, it's not an experimental science, not yet. I truly believe in the future will be. Okay, somebody may just say, unless I see the perispirit, I don't believe in it. Then I think it becomes pretty much the end of the conversation, unless someone will reason using, let's say, one of the many examples, the aspirin. Well, aspirin works, nobody knows how it works, but we know it works. You see the phenomenon happening. We see levitation, so we're going to read here about levitations in this chapter later on. We see tables being lifted up the air. We see objects moving towards letters and spelling words in a very intelligent manner, answering popular questions. You see it. We don't totally understand how it happens, but it was revealed. And that's the only thing that's a little bit hard, I believe, for many people. The perispirit is primarily revelation from the spirits to us. The perispirit, it's happening because the spirit, upon having a thought that pre-established, has a spiritual body. A spiritual body is that with arms and legs, so to say, that he can use to act upon matter, utilizing, of course, all the fluids that you are going to talk about. And I think that is the biggest challenge for the materialist, those who do not have the vision to go beyond what the science can show to us now, is to say, well, everything that it says makes sense, except that I don't believe in perispirit because it's not proven its existence to me. And putting just as a scientific way, I don't even condemn them. Because so far the perispirit, as much as I know, is a revelation from the spirits. And we do believe in it. You do understand it, not only believe, understand it. Not in a religious or a mystical means, but reasoning. is that in order for those phenomena to happen, in order for in a spirit to make its thoughts like become something, become an action, it requires something. It requires some kind of body, some kinds of hands to make it work. And that thing is the perispirit. If someone rejects that, is not able to reason on that, I think it's pretty much the end of the conversation. For at least for physical phenomena, there is no other way to make anyone understand how it works, as we do understand. And then for them, it will only to exist in the level of the supernatural. And I didn't go about the existence of the soul, because again, the Spirit's book explains all that. What are the spirits, the interaction of the spirit with the body, what soul that we know in Spiritism, soul defines an incarnated spirit, and all those things. So I don't think there's a need to go through all that right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Continue.
yes, please.
Okay, number 10. To those who regard matter as a sole power of nature, anything that cannot be explained by the laws of matter is extraordinary or supernatural. And for them, the extraordinary is synonymous with superstition. Thus, religion, which is founded on the existence of a material principle, would be the fabric of superstition. They dare not say this out loud, but they mutter it under their breath, and they think they can keep up appearances by claiming that religion is necessary for people and for children in order to make them wise. Hence, we are faced with two choices. Either the religious principle is true or it is false. If it is true for everybody. If it is false, it is no more beneficial for uneducated than for enlightened persons.
Okay, I think I already covered that.
Okay, so we continue with 11.
Yeah, unless anybody has any comment.
I think that this discussion of religion is an interesting one, right? Because Kardec is very clear, right? Religious, the spirituality either is true or false. It's true for everybody or it's false. No more beneficial for uneducated than for enlightened, because at the time of Kardec, when Karl Marx started disseminating Marxism, he brought the idea that religion is the opium of the population, right? Which means that the uneducated people would find refuge in religion, and the educated people will move away from religion because it's all superstition. And here we are 200 years later, and a good 80% of the population of the world believes in some sort of spirituality. So if it was false, it would be disappearing very fast, especially with the progress, right? So there is something there even if you don't think that any of the spiritual beliefs that are out there make any sense. There is something there, because it cannot be that 80% of the world is delusional, right? Unless you think that, and then it's a different discussion. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, spirituality is throughout all cultures. The problem with religion not spirituality, religion as an institution, is dogmatic, and its close is very has a sense of finality. It is what it is, a period. Does not open room to exploration of other possibilities, right? Because this exploration of other possibilities is science, and that becomes the conflict between religion and science. And once it becomes something final, as an example, someone who comes and tells me that dinosaurs are the greatest product of human imagination. And when I question why you say that, the answer is because it's not in the Bible. It tells me, it gives me this idea that I have a religion that to me is absolutely repugnant, that is so enclosed in itself. Because the individuals, perhaps not even the individuals, are not able to see the scriptures as a book of moral values, but I think it's a book of science. And because of it, if it's not in there, if it's not in those books, it does not exist. Since the communicability, although it's there, but others cannot see it, they do not believe, they are not rejected. And on the scientific spectrum, if you don't demonstrate to me the existence of the perispirit, I cannot accept it. Which again, it just reveals two things about our human nature: one, pride, and two, laziness. Okay, 11.
Okay, 11. Those who attack spiritism by calling it extraordinary usually find support in the materialist principle, and thus in denying every effect of an extra material origin. They necessarily deny the existence of the soul. However, probe the depths of their thought and scrutinize the meanings of their words, and you will almost always find this principle, which, even if not categorically formulated, nonetheless shines through under the guise of rational philosophical pretense behind which they hide it. Therefore, by rejecting as extraordinary everything that results from the existence of the soul, they're at least being self-consistent. Since they do not admit the cause, they cannot admit the effect, sense the prejudice that keeps them from judging spiritism soundly, because they start from the principle of denying everything that is not material. But as for us, just because we claim that the effects result from the existence of the soul, must we therefore accept all the facts that are deemed to be extraordinary? Must we be the champions of all dreamers, or adepts of all sorts of utopias and eccentric theories? One would have to know very little about spiritism to think so. However, this does not concern our adversaries, since the requirement that they must understand what they are talking about is of little interest to them. According to them, the extraordinary is absurd. Spiritism is based upon extraordinary facts. Therefore, spiritism is absurd. For them, this is a sentence that cannot be appealed. They believe they are presenting an incontestable argument when, after erudite research into the convulsionaries of Saint Dard, the camisards of Servants, or the nuns of Loudun, they arrive at the discovery of fraudulent evidence that no one can contest. But are stories such as these the gospel of spiritism? Have spiritism's supporters ever denied that charlatanism has exploited some incidents to its own advantage? That imagination has engendered them? That fanaticism has exaggerated many of them? But spiritism is no more responsible for extravagances that may be committed in its name than its true science for the abuses of ignorance, or true religion for the excesses of fanatism. Many critics only judge spiritism in the light of fairy tales and popular legends, which are only its fictitious forms. That is the same as judging history in the light of historical romances or tragedies.
Okay, read 12 also, Zoraida, please.
Number 12, okay. According to the most elementary logic, in order to discuss the matter, it is necessary to be thoroughly familiar with it, since critics' opinions are only worth anything when they speak with causal knowledge. Only in this way can their opinion, even when erroneous, be taken seriously. But what weight can it carry when it is applied to unfamiliar matter? True critics must provide evidence, not just from erudition, but from a profound knowledge of the object under consideration, and with absolute impartiality of judgment. Otherwise, any minstrel could assume the right to judge Rossini and any muralist can critic Raphael.
Okay, thank you. So I always like to take this topic and imagine Kardec is addressing three groups of individuals. One, the purely religious, that because it's not on the scriptures, that because it goes against the dogmas of whatever religion they follow, they would not accept what the Spiritism suggests. Another group would be the purely scientist, materialist, that denies existence of anything that is not matter, that denies the existence of anything that cannot be proved with experiment, to them. And the third group would be those, perhaps us, who is willing to reason, willing to listen, willing to accept the fact as it's happened, and then try to understand those facts. Again, aspirin works. I don't know how, but I see it works. The phenomena is happening. There is an individual who is levitating. Everybody's seeing that living being just floating in the air. I rule out charlatanism. I rule out fraud. I did the work of ruling those things out. So I know it's a fact. Now, I can accept this as extraordinary, meaning that goes outside of the spectrum of what is natural. Or I can take the approach that Kardec suggests to us, that tells that if it happens, it has to be within the spectrum of natural. The fact that we do not understand the science, that we do not understand how it works, does not make it an illusion, does not make it impossible, does not make it extraordinary. It just means there is a phenomena that is not well understood by our science yet. Again, I have no idea how an airplane can fly so fast, so up high, and so heavy. But it does. And I can deny it, but I'm sure there is a science that explains it. And I know that individuals can levitate. And I know there is a science behind of it that explains it. And its science is called Spiritism. So if you are a pure materialist, you're going to use the fact that the extraordinary is absurd. Well, Spiritism agrees with that 100%. Extraordinary, not the extraordinary, let me put it differently, because extraordinary is just outside of the ordinary, outside of the customary. Yeah, so it is indeed. It's not, people are not levitating in every corner, everywhere. You go to subway, you don't see people levitating the subways on Fifth Avenue. So yeah, people levitate is extraordinary, it's outside of the ordinary, it's outside of the customary, but it's not supernatural. That absolute that spirit say it's absurd. If it happens, it has to be within the realm of nature. Now, the nature of the physical material world or the nature of the spiritual world, but it's still nature. And there are so many phenomena that has happened, that people witnessed, the people saw, that was published in magazines, in books that happened, like the Summitard, the commissionaries of Cévennes, the nuns of London. Those are all things that Kardec mentions here that undeniably happened, that people witnessed, that maybe some may choose to reject, demonstrate just plain pride, because we see it happen, right? It's like the St. Thomas, right? With when Jesus showed up to them after his crucifixion, and St. Thomas have to touch the wound that Jesus had one between his ribs over there, that the soldier has punctured his body when he was still on the cross, to believe it. And some not even put their finger there would believe. What can we do? It's nothing we can do, right? But it happened. It was documented in the magazines, in the newspapers of the time, was studied as a phenomenon of magnetism. In Spiritism, we document that it happened. We'd give a plausible explanation by that it happened. But unfortunately, even within Spiritism, others would, out of fanaticism, exaggerate them, augment the fact, put some utopic reasons for the fact, which Kardec would be the first one to condemn and ask us not to do it. The importance of educating ourselves in the science of Spiritism to prevent us to be fanatics. I think the worst thing that could happen to the doctrine is a fanatic Spiritist. That unfortunately we see some out there is a disaster. Those phenomena have a reason and have a how it happened. Spiritism can explain it. Some of them was extremely exaggerated. On the Summitard, the commissionaries of Cévennes, there is a publication in the Spiritist magazine, in which the spirit that was that being called the one that was causing all that phenomena to happen, actually gave it a communication say that it was even him himself, that all the spirits over there, he was producing most of those stuff. And for those does not remember, there was gosh, what's the name of the priest? It was a priest that had was a very good priest in France, and when he died, things start happening in the cemetery around where his body was buried, and a group of people would go over there and go for miracles. There was some reported cures had happened over there in those moments, and when they would get together over there, they would go into convulsions and almost like an epileptic kind of convulsions and move around, so much so that the government had actually closed the cemetery because of it. And it happened. It was really happened. It was witnessed. Okay. It well studied in the study of mesmerism, those things. It has naturally spiritual influence. And the name of, I forgot the name of the saint, the priest. The priest gave a communication saying that was not even him who was doing most of that stuff that was happening over there. And then on 12, and I think it's very short. Everybody can have opinions. Everybody can even deny facts. But opinions only have the value of opinion. Okay, I may say that, potatoes are better than mushrooms. Okay. And then, and it's just an opinion. Now I would say potatoes are better than mushrooms in providing potassium. Okay, it's just an opinion. What is the evidence that I have behind it? Now, if scientific, I get the same amount of potato equal the same amount of mushrooms, do analysis, and you see that the same amount of potatoes and same amount of mushrooms, I have more potassium in the potato than in the mushrooms, I prove I have the evidence. Now, it's not only just an opinion, it's a fact. I can produce evidence, but not all evidence can be proved experimentally as the amount of potassium in something, right? That can be proved. It's easy to prove. You have methodologies right now that can do that. Not everything can, right? But you can produce evidence through observations only, not necessarily through experiment. Now, if you think of archaeology, can you prove that it was the Egyptians that built those things over there? No, you prove experimentally. No, you can't experiment anymore. It's impossible. Can you demonstrate experimentally that the dinosaurs existed? No, you can do that by observation. We have sciences that even give the age, of those things found. People refuse to accept or deny that science. Not much that we can do. So, opinions are only worth anything when they speak with causal knowledge. Only in this way can their opinions, even when erroneous, be taken seriously. I think this is fantastic. So if I think that mushrooms have more potassium than potatoes, and I make an experiment, and I get the wrong calculations, I still deserve merit because I present some evidence. Then you'll be corrected. The calculation will be corrected. But just saying out of saying without any evidence, it carries absolutely no merit, it has absolutely no consideration. If, I don't know, in arts, people look at those pictures on, let's say, I don't know, of famous artists, and say that this is better than that because it has this and that. I don't know what I think of those arts. I can comment. But they do. They understand. They study. They spend years understand that art. So their critique carries value, right? And I can only say that I like, I don't like. I can go to the museum and look at a picture over there that say, this is weird, I don't like it. Okay, doesn't matter. Now, a critic who studies art will point so many things on that picture and say this has value for this, for that, and it's not so good on this, and because they understand. they know the art, right? They say that coffee has over 600 different flavors. Well, they study it. Are they crazy? No, they're not crazy. They studied the science. They study coffee. They tested coffee. I can only say that it's bitter, sweet, or sour. But a connoisseur will taste different types of coffee and will distinguish many different nuances of flavor, 600 total. Their value, their criticism, their opinion values a lot more than mine. I can only say that I like it, I don't like. So it only has value for myself. But for a connoisseur, it has value for everyone. Okay.
Okay, number 13. Therefore, Spiritism does not accept all facts that may be regarded as extraordinary or supernatural. Far from it. Instead, it demonstrates the impossibility of a great number of them and the foolishness of some of the beliefs that comprise superstition per se. It is true that among the spirit phenomenon that Spiritism accepts, there are some that disbelievers regard as unequivocally extraordinary in nature. In other words, they represent superstition as they wish. However, they should at least limit the discussion to these because they have nothing to say regarding the others. They will be preaching to the already converted. By criticizing what Spiritism itself refutes, they demonstrate their ignorance about the subject and they miss the mark. But how far can a Spiritist belief reach? You will ask. Read and observe, and you will understand. Acquiring any science demands time and study, and Spiritism, which addresses the most serious questions of philosophy in every sector of the social order, and which encompasses both the physical and moral individual at the same time, is a complete science and philosophy in itself, and it cannot be assimilated in only a few hours, which is true of any other science. It would be very childish to see the whole of Spiritism in a turning table, just as it would be to see the whole of physics in a few children's toys. For whoever does not want to remain on the surface, months and years rather than hours will have to be spent in order to probe all its mysteries. In light of this, decide for yourself the degree of understanding and the value of the opinions of those who assume themselves the right to judge simply because they have seen one or two experiments by way of entertainment or as a pastime. No doubt they will state what they do not have the time needed for such study, as they wish. Nothing so obliges them. However, if you do not have time to learn about a matter, you cannot talk about it, let alone make judgments about it, unless you want to be accused of being irresponsible. The more elevated the position you occupy in a science, the less excusable you will be if you thoughtlessly try to address a subject with which you are unfamiliar.
Okay. So the Spiritism as a science, it will not only demonstrate the possibility of the phenomena, as it will also reveal the impossibility of other phenomena. It will separate fact from fiction. It will separate true spirituality from fanaticism, from superstition. That's a better word here. And perhaps that is one of the greatest value as a science, is to eliminate the superstitious and put everything in the realm of nature, and therefore eliminating the supernatural, as is almost extinguishing the word supernatural. If it happens, it's natural. We may not understand. We may not see how it happens, but if it happens, it is in accordance with the laws of nature, or it cannot happen. Okay? If it happens, we witness, we see that it's happening. We can reject out of radicalism, which is ignorance, or out of laziness. And I don't want to deal with this because it will require time, it will require effort. And that's what Kardec's telling us here. The doctrine was revealed at start out of the phenomena. The phenomena was the means to get our attention for a new paradigm for us. It was palpable, was visible to everyone. We can take it seriously and then study it. And for those who did not witness, for those who are not ready at that time to be there present, it's being put together in this codification form, which the doctrine, the codification of the doctrine. But in order to get it, to grasp it, it's not going to be in 2 or 3 minutes for most of us, right? It requires time, it requires effort to understand, to grasp it. And Kardec says, well, you understand, if you don't want to put the effort, to put the time that is required, that's fine. But it takes away from you the right to criticize, to judge what you did not put effort and time to understand. The same way that I can go and look at the picture in the museum and say, yeah, I don't like it, it's ugly. It's my loss. Stand out seeking to understand, seeking to hear those who understand it better, who knows the science. And then I'll gain appreciation towards that thing that at the first glance was ugly. But with the understanding, being humble to listen to those who understand it better, I gain a new appreciation for something that I could just ignore. Now it has value to me. No one will learn a science in a matter of hours. It's going to take a long time. Acquiring any science demands time and study, and Spiritism, which addresses the most serious question of philosophy in every sector of social order, and which encompasses both the physical and moral individual at the same time, is a complete science and philosophy in itself, and it cannot be assimilated only in a few hours. That's what Kardec's telling us here, and that's what all this passage of it is important to us. I think from reading this, we leave the word supernatural as a product of imagination. So you see the supernatural to Hollywood, to the writers, and even those. Perhaps it has a degree of the natural that is beyond our comprehension at this time, but eventually it will be. Okay, comments?
Okay.
So
Number
next week,
Okay.
week we can go through the summary of this topic and continue on, but 27, it's time to stop.
So next Sunday, which is the last Sunday of the month, we will have our Q&A session. Please bring your questions so we can have a good conversation. Okay. It's the weekend of Memorial Day. So SGNY will be closed on Monday, Memorial Day. On Saturday, the presentation by the United States Spiritist Federation also won't happen. So be a quiet weekend, good for a good discussion on Sunday on the Q&A. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Carol, can you do a
Yeah.
final prayer?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elmo. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And thank you, Sarita, for reading. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks for the opportunity again to be together as brothers and sisters for our studies of the Medium's book. We have learned that the supernatural is whatever is contrary to the laws of nature. We can use logic and reason and look to science and technology for explanations. However, denial is unproductive. It does require time, effort, and study to have a better understanding of these items. Every intellectual effect must have an intelligent cause. The soul survives death, and therefore phenomenon could be possible and is possible. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, for guiding and inspiring us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, and for our loved ones, our directors, our counselors, the mediums and workers. We pray for inner peace, and we pray for world peace so needed, and for those who are suffering in the physical world, as well as those who are in need of healing in the spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all spiritist centers throughout the world, that they may grow, they may expand, that they may be guided and protected in all endeavors. As we close today, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. We know that we are never alone. Guidance is always available as we ask and do our part. And may we go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of charity, and of service to the good. So be it.